Testimonies aren't something that should be hidden from the world. They're not something that should be kept secret. Though your testimony is the story behind your life. It's the story of your life and how you've come to know God and all the difficult places that you've been.
So the best way to
But that's what it is. It's the story of your life. It's not your story. It's not for you to keep. Testimonies are weapons of spiritual warfare and are made to be spread. They're made to help people see and bring people closer to God. Testimonies are powerful things, and I wanted to be able to share my testimony with you. God's done a lot of amazing things in my life. When I was little, I was actually raised between agnostic, borderline atheistic, and non-practicing Catholic atmospheres as a child. Always being taught to keep an open mind to everything hardwired my brain into becoming an insatiable machine. God was always in the back of my mind growing up, but unfortunately that is where he remained for the longest time. The first time that I can clearly remember asking aloud whether or not God existed was to my dad when I was in middle school. He had faith but no works as far as I could tell. I remember he was fairly shocked at the question I'd asked, but I can't remember his response. Though I do remember mine. But how do you know? Became the one question I could never find a convincing answer to. I gave up on the idea of truth around the same time that I started high school, and my parents divorced when I was little, so I did a good bit of moving around and attended a handful of different schools. I was never the most outgoing person, so it was fairly difficult for me to meet or even warm up to new people or places, which left me with a lot of time to myself. I had gotten pretty settled up in North Carolina, where I had what I would call an average teenage lifestyle, partying with seniors, gallivanting, causing mischief, and just spending more time with my friends than I would my parents. But I was in ROTC and I figured I had my head on pretty straight. I knew what I was doing with my life and where I was going. I had actually planned on being a Marine, but that was before I moved back down to Florida. I agree with my friend Sean and my pastor Ben when they speak of West Palm being one of the epicenters of the world. A lot happens down here and most people are moving too fast to really notice, which is just a part of the societal structure here and happens to back up this claim almost perfectly. When I came back down here, I didn't know anyone. The RTC kids and I didn't respond all that well together, so the only foundation I had laid started to crumble rather quickly. In order to satisfy my human need for acceptance, I began my search for company. In other words, I needed friends, which is a difficult thing to do when you're not the most social person in the world. I started sitting over by the offbeat kids during lunch, hoping that it might lead somewhere, and sure enough it did. Soon I was hanging out with them after school. One day someone asked me if I wanted to go smoke, and I told them that I had my own. I was referring to cigarettes. I had misunderstood the question. I had smoked a few times before, so figured why not. As intimidating as the Marine Corps is, I figured they'd never find out anyway, so I had nothing to worry about. You hear people say all the time that pot is a gateway drug, but no one ever truly believes that until it's far too late. I started losing interest in everything around me in a very subtle way. Before, I was a passionate kid bent on joining the military and getting through school as soon as possible just so I could do so. Even that started to slip away from me. I would have had no clue what to do with my life if it wasn't for the military, so I held on to that idea, but my passion had left me. I needed to find something else to drive me, something else to keep me going. I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't find it. My relationships with my parents were dwindling, and there were things going on in my head that I felt crazy for thinking. At first, I began using both synthetic and natural drugs in order to just have fun. I'd use them at parties or when we were all hanging out just to try to make life a little bit more interesting. But as time went by, I found myself wanting more all throughout the day. The more I did drugs, the more questions I had, and the more questions I had, the lonelier I felt. And although this theory has the potential to be flawed, I find it quite accurate. I created what we can call an imaginary friend. This friend had no physical form and existed only within my own mind. I called her Alice, and she was the one I could turn to if I ever needed her. She would help me solve my problems, find answers to my questions, and even help me get through the day. Around the same time, I came into contact with members of a cult who hung around the same bookstore as we did, and apparently everybody knew each other. Not very many of my friends were deeply involved with them, but I was extremely curious. They introduced me to a lot of New Age concepts and books that I began to read obsessively. Books about energy manipulation, astral projection, and self-transcendental transformation, which consist of widely unaccepted ideas of telepathy, telekinesis, and pretty much all things considered witchcraft. I practiced this art pretty seriously and it began to take a hold of me. There's no doubt in my mind that drugs opened up doors to the spiritual realm, as much as we'd like not to believe that. The more I turned to drugs, the more I turned to the occult, and the more I turned to the occult, the more I turned to Alice, the only one who could possibly understand what I was going through. I remember very clearly one day, as I was walking through my house, my mom stopping me and telling me in the most concerned and sentimental voice, "No matter what you're going through, we've all been through it before. What you're going through is normal, so don't think you're crazy." I think in most cases she would have been right, but I don't think there is any way that she could have possibly predicted what I was really going through, which is why I had Alice. As I continued down this path of confusion, I began battling a serious depression. Alice told me that I had a great destiny and that all life is written, that we are like actors in a play written by the universe itself. It's hard to believe in a higher purpose when you feel like you've lost all free will. She told me that all people were meant to keep a certain balance in the world, that it was not just by chance that she had come to me. Then she told me that she wasn't who I had thought she was. She said that the only way that she could gain my trust was to deceive me into believing that she was Alice, this person that I had created. She was a he, and he didn't have a name. He then told me that he was my guide and that he was here to lead me down the path that had been foreordained. He told me that the only way that I could truly be happy in this life was to fulfill my destiny, to keep the balance. He led me to believe that the balance was held by a spectrum, and where you fell on that spectrum was mere chance. That I had been chosen to be a part of the dark balance, and I believed him. I named him Clyde. Drugs only amplified my newfound reality, and soon I found myself wandering over from witchcraft to even darker, more disturbing realms. I started to dig into the Satanic Bible because I simply wanted to compare it to the Holy Bible. I had never read the Holy Bible, nor did I even have these intentions. I was being led astray lie after lie, and I didn't even know that there was a light that existed. My mind was slave to the enemy, and there was no other way around it. What had once been a struggle within me turned to a white flag surrender. Everything Clyde told me I took to heart. Darkness consumed my mind and took my thoughts to places I'd never thought I'd witness. Thoughts of sexual abuse, mutilation, and all sorts of demonic activity began to possess me. The thought of taking someone else's life away from them entirely festered and became an obsession. I thought I knew exactly who I was and thought I was exactly who I was supposed to be.